All right, today we're jumping into a story from way back that honestly feels more like a modern political thriller. We're talking secret missions, divine orders, and a coup d'etat that goes down so fast it'll make your head spin, and it completely changes the future of a nation.
So that really is the big question, right? How does a general become a king in a single afternoon? This isn't some long, drawn-out war or a slow political climb. Nope. This is a total government overthrow that happens in just a few hours. And it all kicks off with one guy and a little flask of oil. So let's get into it.
Okay, so our story kicks off at this really tense military base, Ramoth Gilead. Picture this. The king of Israel, his name's Joram. He's off the board. He's in a different city, Jezreel, laid up and recovering from some battle wounds. And that means his number one general, a guy named Jehu, is left holding the reins of the entire army. And it's right here, in this moment, that the fuse for a massive rebellion gets lit.
So the prophet Elisha gives one of his students this list of commands. And it sounds like something straight out of a spy movie. It's just bang, bang, bang. First, gird your loins. The source we're looking at has this great little detail. It's basically pulling up your robe to make, and I quote, instant Bermuda shorts. The point is, you gotta move fast. Then, find Jehu. Get him into a private room. Pour this sacred oil on his head to show he's been chosen by God. Tell him he's the new king. And then, open the door and just run. Don't look back. Just go.
You know, that urgency is so important here. This wasn't some big, fancy ceremony. This was a flat-out conspiracy. And the source points out that this detail, the need for speed, actually lends a ton of credibility to the story. Think about it. When you're plotting to overthrow a king, you don't hang around for small talk. It's get in, get the job done, and get out before you get caught. Your life literally depends on it.
All right, so the young prophet does exactly what he's told. He finds General Jehu, pulls him aside into a room, anoints him with the oil. But then something really interesting happens. The messenger goes completely off script. He says way more than Elisha actually told him to say.
And you can see just how wild this escalation is. The original order was super simple. Just say it. I anoint you king over Israel. But what the messenger actually says? Whoa. It turns into this full-blown, divine, and incredibly violent mandate. It's no longer just, hey, you're the king now. It's, you're the king over God's people, and your first job is to utterly destroy the house of Ahab and get revenge for my servants. Oh, and by the way, dogs are going to eat Jezebel. It's intense.
So this really frames the whole thing as something way bigger than just a political power grab. The reason given here is divine justice. You see, Queen Jezebel had been on this campaign, systematically hunting down and killing the prophets of Israel's God. So this rebellion, it's presented as God himself stepping in out of compassion for his people who are suffering under this regime.
So the young prophet bolts, and Jehu walks back out to his fellow commanders. And you've got to just picture the scene for a second. He's just come from this super secret meeting, and he's got anointing oil literally dripping down his head. His men know immediately that something huge just went down.
And the speed of what happens next is it's mind-blowing. There's no debate. No one forms a committee to discuss the pros and cons. Jehu just tells them what the prophet said, and that's it. Their response is instantaneous. They grab their cloaks, throw them down on the steps as a makeshift throne, someone blows a trumpet, and they all start shouting, Jehu is king, right then and there.
Yeah, this source material just puts it perfectly. Wow. No ifs, no ands, no buts. There's zero hesitation. Not a single person says, maybe we should sleep on this. It's just this immediate, unanimous, total shift in loyalty. It tells you everything you need to know about how badly they wanted to change. So, you gotta ask, why so fast? Why did they all jump on board without a second thought? Well, the source gives us two big reasons. First, Jehu was obviously a super charismatic leader, the kind of guy his soldiers would follow anywhere. But the second reason is maybe even bigger. It points to this deep, simmering anger with the current king, Joram. His mom, Jezebel, had been pushing the worship of a foreign god, Baal, and going after anyone loyal to the God of Israel. So the army, the very guys sworn to protect the nation, were probably just fuming under that leadership. They were completely ripe for a revolution.
Okay, so Jehu has his army's backing, and he does not waste a single second. He hops in his chariot and just floors it toward Jezreel, where the wounded king is resting up. And the whole scene shifts. Now we're with a lookout on a tower, squinting at the horizon. He sees this cloud of dust getting bigger and bigger, and you can just feel the tension ratcheting up.
back with King Joram, he sees this group approaching, and it seems like he gets this immediate bad feeling in his gut. He doesn't just assume, oh good, reinforcements. Nope. His first instinct is that something is wrong. So he sends a messenger out on horseback with a pretty nervous question.
The king's question is simple. Do you come in peace? Jehu's reply is just bone-chilling. He basically says, what do you have to do with peace? Fall in behind me. And just like that, the king's own messenger defects. He switches sides and joins Jehu's crew. You can feel the momentum is all on Jehu's side now.
So, when the first guy doesn't come back, Joram sends out a second messenger. And you're not going to believe this, the exact same thing happens. He rides up, asks about peace, and Jehu basically absorbs him right into his army. This coup is quickly becoming an unstoppable tidal wave.
Finally, the lookout on the tower figures out who's leading the charge, and he doesn't recognize him by his face or a banner, but by how he drives. And this gives us one of the most iconic lines in this entire story. The lookout yells, "The driving is like that of Jehu. He drives like a maniac." This isn't just a general on a mission. This is a force of nature, absolutely possessed, hurtling towards his destiny.
So here we go. The stage is officially set. You've got Jehu, the maniac driver, with what he believes is a mandate from God, about to come face to face with King Joram. But you gotta understand, this showdown is about so much more than just who gets to be king.
To really get what's going on here, we have to pull the camera back. We have to zoom out. Because this isn't really Jehu versus Joram. This is the final bloody chapter in a spiritual war that has been tearing this nation apart for generations. It's nothing less than a fight for the very soul of Israel.
And the two sides couldn't be clearer. On one side, you've basically got Team Yahweh. That's the God of Israel, his prophets like Elijah and Elisha, and now his chosen instrument of judgment, General Jehu. And on the other side, you've got Team Baal. That's the foreign god pushed by Queen Jezebel, her late husband Ahab, and now their son, King Joram.
The source material really makes it clear that this moment is the climax of this huge, sprawling story. We're talking dozens of chapters building up the tension, all asking one central question. Is the God of Israel going to be totally erased and replaced by this foreign god, Baal? I mean, everything is on the line right here.
And you know, from the perspective of the source itself, the final outcome is never really a question. There's this deep conviction that God's purposes are going to be accomplished, that he's not going to be defeated. The real drama, the nail-biting part, is in seeing how it all comes together.
And that really brings us to the final thought here. This incredible story of a maniac and a mandate, a conspiracy and a crown, it's not just some ancient history lesson. The source kind of leaves us with this final, really provocative question that turns the camera right back around on us. It forces us to ask, not if God's purposes will be accomplished, but are we in line with them? That's a pretty powerful thought to leave you with.